You ever move somewhere that just feels older than the map says it should be? Like the air itself has been breathing longer than anyone alive? That's what I felt when I first arrived in Hollow's Rest, a small rural town in the Pacific Northwest, tucked between fog-heavy hills and acres of pine that never seemed to end. I came here in late autumn, looking for quiet. I'd grown tired of city noise, constant movement, and people who didn't look each other in the eyes anymore. A friend told me about a house for rent, small, cheap, a little old, but surrounded by peace. That's what I thought I needed. Peace. I didn't know that peace could watch you from the dark. The first thing people told me about Hollow's Rest was that it used to be a logging town. The second thing they told me was about the cat. Everyone in town knew of it. I heard about it at the diner on my first morning. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and eyes that never stayed on you for long, poured me coffee and asked where I was staying. When I mentioned the rental near the old cemetery road, she froze mid-pour. "Ah," she said after a second. "You're out by St. Mary's, huh?" I nodded, not realizing what I was stepping into. She hesitated again, then added softly, "You see a black cat out there. Don't shoo it away. Just let it be." Her voice dropped to a whisper when she said that last part, as if she didn't want the air to hear. That night, I looked out from my porch. The moon was half hidden behind mist, and the trees around the house leaned close like they were listening. There was a gravel road leading past the yard and down to the cemetery. I could just make out the faint iron gate through the fog. And that's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a shadow. Something low, still, blending into the gray. But then the porch light caught a glint. Two faint yellow eyes staring right back at me. A black cat, sitting at the edge of the road, perfectly still, facing the cemetery gate. It didn't move when I called softly, didn't flinch. It just sat there until the fog rolled thicker, and then it was gone. The next morning I asked the landlord about it. He was an old man, quiet but kind enough, and he laughed under his breath when I brought up the cat. "Ah, folks still talk about that thing," he said, shaking his head. "Been around longer than I can remember. Black as night, eyes like candlelight. Used to belong to old Henry, caretaker of St. Mary's back in the 70s. Good man. Used to say that cat never left his side." "What happened to him?" I asked. The old man stirred his coffee for a long time before answering. "Heart gave out one winter night. Died right by the chapel. Buried him there, of course. Folks say the cat stayed by his grave for days, then started moving around on its own. Different graves, every night." He looked up, eyes narrowing slightly. "People say it's a bad sign. But Henry wouldn't hurt nobody, nor would his cat. I think it's just keeping watch." That image stuck in my head all day. A cat keeping watch over graves in a forgotten cemetery. Still, I told myself it was just small-town superstition. That evening, I took a walk. The air was cold enough to sting my nose, and the last of the daylight was sliding behind the pines. The cemetery gate stood rusted and half open, with a little sign that said, "St. Mary's Rest, 1892. I didn't plan on going inside, but I saw movement through the fog. That same black cat again, slipping between headstones, tail low, moving like smoke. Something about the way it moved didn't feel feral. It was deliberate, purposeful, almost reverent. I pulled out my phone flashlight and stepped closer. The light barely pierced the mist, but I could see the cat had stopped at one particular grave. It sat there, completely still, facing the stone. The name carved into it was Eleanor Finch, 1949 to 2003. And right below, someone had scratched into the base. Still waiting. The air around me felt wrong then, like sound itself had gone heavy. No wind, no crickets, no distant highway hum. just silence thick enough to make me dizzy. Then the cat turned. Its eyes caught the light again, and for a split second, I swear I saw two silhouettes instead of one. The cat, and behind it, something faintly human-shaped, like a figure leaning over the grave, and then gone. I stumbled backward, heart pounding, and almost dropped my phone. The cat didn't move. It just kept staring at me, slow blink after slow blink, before finally turning back to the headstone. When I got home that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me. I didn't see anything, but every shadow in my house felt alive, like someone was standing just out of sight. At 3:17 a.m., I woke up to a sound outside. Not scratching, not footsteps, just a low, rhythmic purring. I peeked through the blinds. There it was again, sitting by the front steps, staring straight at my door. The next few days were strange. Every morning I'd find small paw prints in the dirt near the gate. Every night I'd hear that faint purring from somewhere outside. And every single time the cat would be gone by sunrise. Eventually, curiosity won over fear. If this was just an old cat haunting a graveyard, then I needed to see for myself. So one night, just after midnight, I followed it. I put on a jacket, grabbed a flashlight, and waited on the porch until the shape appeared again, black against the fog. When it started down the road, I followed quietly. It moved slow, as if expecting me to come. The cemetery looked different at night, older, like the earth itself had sunk lower with time, pulling the graves deeper. The iron gate creaked as I pushed it open, the sound echoing like a scream through the mist. The cat led me down the main path, weaving past crosses and tilted stones until it stopped again, this time by an unmarked grave. No flowers, no carving, just a lump of earth with a wooden cross stuck at an angle. The cat sat down, tail curled around its paws. Then it looked up at me, eyes gleaming gold in the dark. For a moment, everything went silent again, until I heard a whisper. Not loud, not clear, but close, right beside me. It sounded like someone sighing through a closed door, or breathing through the soil. I swung the flashlight around. Nothing. Just empty mist and graves. The cat didn't move. It stared at the ground, and I realized its ears were twitching, like it was listening to something I couldn't hear. Then, slowly, the wind picked up. And I swear for one flicker of a second, the shape of a person shimmered above the grave. A faint outline, like heat rising off pavement. And then, gone. When I looked back down, the cat was gone too. No paw prints, no sound, just empty earth and fog thick enough to choke on. I didn't sleep that night. I just kept thinking about what I'd seen, or thought I'd seen. The next morning, I went back to the diner. The waitress looked at me and didn't need to ask. "You saw it," she said quietly. I nodded. "What is it doing out there?" I asked. She looked out the window toward the hill. "It's not bringing death, if that's what you think. Folks get that wrong, always have. That cat, it's helping the ones who can't rest. Been doing that since Henry passed." "Henry," I said. "The caretaker?" She nodded. "He used to say no soul should be left alone in the cold. Guess his cat took that to heart." I wanted to believe that. I really did. But that night I saw something that made me question if even the kindest ghosts could leave you untouched. After that talk at the diner, I tried to carry on as if nothing strange had happened. But St. Mary's seemed to breathe louder every night. From my porch I could hear the wind move through the pines, but it always stopped near the cemetery, like it refused to cross whatever boundary kept the dead quiet. And the cat kept coming back. Sometimes I'd see it before dusk, sitting on the fence post across from my house, tail twitching like a metronome. Other times it would appear after midnight, padding soundlessly through the fog, heading toward the graves as though on schedule. I started keeping notes, dates, times, which graves it visited. Each night was different, never the same stone twice in a row. But after 2 weeks, I noticed something. Every name it chose belonged to someone who died suddenly. Accidents, fires, missing persons never found whole, and every one of them had the same unmarked patch of grass a few feet from the stone, like the earth hadn't settled right. I told myself I'd stop watching, but you can't turn away from a mystery that looks you in the eyes. So one evening, I followed it again. The moon was high and white that night, and the fog came late, leaving the path clear enough for me to see my breath. The cat walked ahead, tail brushing the weeds, until it reached the far corner of the cemetery, where the oldest graves leaned against each other like crooked teeth. It stopped beside a grave half swallowed by ivy. The stone was cracked, words almost gone. I wiped the moss away and read the faint carving. Henry M. Coleman, 1932, 1977. The caretaker. The cat sat down at his grave and began to purr, slow, deep, like a hum you could feel through your bones. Something about that sound felt wrong in the quiet. Too low, too steady. It vibrated the air around the grave, and for a moment, I thought I saw the dirt shift. Not much. Just a breath of movement, like something exhaling beneath the soil. Then I heard a second sound. A voice, almost too faint to be human. Still here. It came from below. I stumbled back, flashlight shaking in my hand, beam cutting across the fog like a knife. No one was there. Only that black cat, still purring, eyes closed as though soothing something unseen. The wind picked up then, swirling leaves around the stones, and I swear I heard whispers in it. Dozens of them, layered, each one a sigh. For a heartbeat I could make out words. Thank you. I'm ready. Let me go. And then silence again. The cat opened its eyes and looked right at me. I don't remember running home, but I remember locking the door, heart slamming so hard it hurt. I didn't sleep. When the sun rose, I drove to the county archive in town. If I was going crazy, I wanted proof. Old newspapers confirmed what the landlord said. Henry Coleman had been the caretaker for 30 years. The night he died, he'd been found in the chapel, candle still burning, his black cat beside him. Locals said he used to walk the cemetery every evening, saying each name out loud so none of them would be forgotten. After his death, people began reporting the cat still doing the rounds. First night, it sat on Henry's grave. Then it started visiting others, always after midnight. Some folks believed it called death. Others said it brought peace. No one ever proved either way. I should have stopped there, but that night, curiosity drove me back again. Maybe I wanted to say thank you. Maybe I wanted to know if Henry could hear me. The fog was heavier than ever, thick enough to taste. The gate screeched open, and the moment I stepped inside, the air turned colder. My flashlight beam hit the cat almost immediately. It was waiting at the center path, sitting perfectly still, like it knew I'd come. I whispered, "Henry?" The cat's ears twitched. Then, for the first time, it moved toward me. Slow steps, deliberate, until it stopped just a few feet away. It looked up, right into my eyes, and I felt something. It's hard to describe. A pressure in my chest like being underwater. Behind my eyes, flashes. Images that weren't mine. A man with weathered hands brushing leaves from a grave. A lantern swinging in the dark. Rain on stone. And the cat, younger, curled at his feet. The vision faded as quickly as it came. When I blinked, the cat was gone. But I wasn't alone. Down the path, a figure stood between the headstones. Tall, hunched slightly, the outline of a man holding something. Maybe a lantern, maybe nothing at all. The air shimmered around him like heat. I couldn't see his face, but I knew. "Henry?" I whispered. The figure didn't move, didn't speak. Only the faint sound of purring reached me again, though the cat was nowhere to be seen. The light, or whatever it was, flickered once, twice, and then both the figure and the sound disappeared into the mist. The quiet that followed felt endless. When I finally left St. Mary's, dawn was breaking. On my porch, I found something small and black curled up by the steps. The cat. It looked up at me, slow blinking, then turned and walked toward the trees. At the edge of the forest, it stopped, glanced back one last time, and vanished into the fog. I haven't seen it since, but every few nights, around 3 a.m., I wake to the sound of purring outside my window. And sometimes, if the moon is right, I swear I see footprints in the dew, leading down the road toward St. Mary's. I tell myself it's still out there, keeping watch, guiding whoever still lingers, finishing the work its master began. But lately the prints stop at my porch, and I can't help but wonder, who is it waiting for now? You ever find an old photo that just doesn't sit right with you? Not because of what's in it, but because of what keeps showing up everywhere else too? That's how this started, with a photograph my grandmother kept tucked behind a cracked frame in our living room. It showed a house fire, black smoke curling up from a 2-story home that used to stand just 2 blocks from where we live now. The picture was taken in the 1950s, back when the neighborhood was still dirt roads and half-built houses. You could see the firemen, the old trucks, people crowding the street in shock. And right there in the bottom corner, a cat, small, black, watching. At first I didn't think much of it, until I saw the same cat again, in another photo. My name's Eli, I'm 17, and I've lived my whole life in a quiet neighborhood outside of Seattle called Merritt Hill. It's the kind of place where nothing ever really happens, except when it does, people remember forever. The fire in my grandma's photo was one of those things. Everyone in town still talks about it. A family barely made it out alive. Their youngest son, Jacob, didn't. But that wasn't the only tragedy Merritt Hill's seen. There was the car crash in the 70s, the missing girl in the 80s, the gas explosion in the 90s. And in every old photo or news clipping I could find, there it was. The same black cat. It started as a curiosity. I found the first few pictures online. Archived news scans, local history pages. Each time something bad happened, there it was, sitting somewhere in the background. Sometimes it was near a window. Sometimes on a curb. Sometimes on a fence post. Head turned toward the camera like it knew someone was watching. I tried to convince myself it was just coincidence, a local stray that hung around for years. But that made no sense. The earliest photo I found was from 1943. The latest was from last year, a flood near the river. 80 years. Same cat. I started asking around. My grandma said the cat had a name once. Shadow. Belonged to a woman named Mrs. Langley who lived across from the park back in the 40s. She said it disappeared after Mrs. Langley died in her sleep. But people kept seeing it. Always after something bad happened. One night, while my grandma was dozing off in her recliner, I looked closer at the first photo again. It wasn't just a cat sitting by the fire truck. It was looking at something. Behind one of the firefighters, through the smoke, there was a shadow. Faint, almost human-shaped. The cat's gaze lined up exactly with it. Something about that made my skin crawl. A week later, I decided to do a school project on local legends. Merritt Hill had plenty. Haunted houses, a lady in white story, the usual small-town stuff. But I picked the cat. When I told my history teacher, she smiled. "Oh, the Watcher," she said. The name made my stomach tighten. "You've heard of it?" I asked. "Everyone who's lived here long enough has." The black cat that shows up before something bad happens. She leaned back in her chair. My grandmother used to tell me it wasn't a warning, though. She said it was a protector, that it saved people. That didn't fit with what I'd seen. Every photo, every story, something bad always happened after. Still, something about the word protector stuck with me. That night, I started collecting everything I could find: screenshots, articles, notes. I made a digital collage of all the photos, and when I zoomed in on each one, I realized something that made my blood run cold. The cat was always facing towards someone specific. In the 1970s car crash photo, a woman being pulled from the wreck. In the 1980s missing girl case, the child's mother sitting on the steps. In the 1990s explosion, a firefighter who later died saving another man. It wasn't looking at tragedy. It was looking at the ones who lived. A few nights later, I woke up to the sound of scratching at my window. It was just past 2 a.m. I pulled the curtains back and froze. A black cat sat outside on the porch railing, staring straight at me through the glass. Its eyes caught the light, gold, almost reflective, like two small mirrors. I didn't move, didn't breathe. It wasn't scared or curious. It just watched. After a long minute, it jumped down and disappeared into the dark. I couldn't shake the feeling that it knew me. The next day, the news broke. A family 2 streets over barely survived a house fire. Faulty heater. Started sometime after midnight. The timestamp hit me like a punch. 2:08 a.m., right around when I saw the cat. I didn't tell anyone what I'd seen. Not yet. But I needed to know more. I went to the local library and dug through microfilm records. I traced the dates of every known sighting. 9 major incidents. 1943, factory fire. 1956, house collapse. 1971, car crash. 1983, disappearance. 1994, gas explosion. 2005, electrical accident. 2011, bridge collapse. 2022, river flood. 2024, house fire. 9. The number sat heavy in my chest. That night I dreamed of the cat. It was walking through a field of ashes, each paw print glowing faintly as it moved. Every step, a whisper, voices, fading one by one. When I woke up, I felt something brush against my leg. I looked down. Nothing was there, but on my windowsill, a single black hair. I know what people say about ghosts and coincidences, but this was something else, something old, something deliberate. I think the cat is running out of time. 9 lives, 9 disasters. And if I'm right, there's only one left. I couldn't stop thinking about that photograph, the one from 1929. The cat's fur caught the light just enough that it looked almost silver-tipped, its gaze locked on something outside the frame. I'd stared at that same look before, because I'd seen it. Recently. The same cat. At first, I thought it was impossible. A coincidence. There are millions of black cats after all. But something about this one. It wasn't just the color or the shape. It was the way it watched. It didn't move like other cats. It waited. I started gathering everything I could about the neighborhood's history. Old newspapers, library archives, social media posts from locals. Fires, accidents, disappearances. All within a few blocks. And every time, someone, always someone, mentioned a black cat nearby, watching. One of the earliest accounts was from 1908. A family diary described a shadowy cat with eyes like polished coal that appeared outside their burning farmhouse before they escaped. Another from the 1950s told of a child rescued from a well, hours before a storm would have drowned him. The rescuer swore the cat's meows had led him there. Different times, different families, same cat. At first, I thought maybe it was just local folklore, a comforting myth people told to make sense of tragedy. But when I compared the photos, the details matched too perfectly. The fur pattern, the faint nick on one ear, even the shape of its eyes. And then there was the most recent picture, taken in 2001. A car crash at the intersection near my street. A single survivor said, "I only hit the brakes because of a black cat crossing. That stop saved their life." The picture showed it clearly, sitting near the wreck, watching, just like before. The more I dug, the more uneasy I felt. Because it wasn't just the cat that stayed constant. It was the places. Every event happened within a tight circle. 5 blocks around my neighborhood. Every generation seemed to face some version of the same disaster. Fires, accidents, disappearances. Like time looping, waiting for another mistake. I began to wonder if the cat was not just appearing in these moments, but because of them. Almost like it knew what was coming. But how could a cat know? How could it remember? The real breakthrough came from an old woman named Mrs. Adler, who lived on the same street her whole life. I found her name mentioned in one of the old newspaper clippings. Her brother had been saved from drowning in 1964. When I knocked on her door, she was already waiting, like she knew why I'd come. Her house smelled like cedar and old photographs. She moved slowly, with deliberate grace, and her eyes lit up when I mentioned the cat. "You've seen it too," she said, not even as a question. I nodded. She smiled faintly. "They always see it, once every few decades. Always someone new, always someone curious." "What do you mean?" I asked. Mrs. Adler led me to a small wooden box on her coffee table. Inside were clippings, photos, and a tiny black collar with a worn silver tag. The tag had no name, only an engraved number, 9. "Roman numeral for 9, I said. She nodded. 9 lives. She told me that her grandmother used to say the cat wasn't cursed, but chosen. "Every time it gives a life," she said, "it loses one of its own. That's the price." Her voice lowered, as if the cat might be listening. "When it's used all 9, it's gone for good." I asked how many lives she thought it had left. She hesitated before answering. 1, maybe none. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak outside my window sounded like footsteps, every shadow like fur moving through the dark. Around 2 a.m., I heard it, soft padding on the gravel driveway. When I peeked out, there it was, the same cat from the photos, sitting in the middle of the street, eyes glinting under the streetlight. It didn't move when I opened the door. It just turned its head toward me, slowly, as if expecting me. And for a second, I swear I heard something that wasn't a meow. It was more like a whisper, a low hum that vibrated through the air. I followed it down the block, past the old houses, past the overgrown lot where the old Adler barn used to stand. The cat moved gracefully, unhurried, like it knew exactly where we were going. We stopped at the corner, right where the intersection met the forest trail. That's when I noticed the flickering headlights. A car was speeding down the hill, its lights swerving, barely in control. I froze, realizing what was about to happen. The cat stepped forward, directly into the road. The car screeched, swerved, and smashed into a ditch instead of the oak tree on the corner. The driver, dazed but alive, stumbled out. And the cat. The cat was gone. I ran toward the car, shouting if they were okay. The driver nodded, trembling. "I didn't mean to hit it," they said. "The cat, it came out of nowhere." I looked around. No sign of it. No blood, no fur, nothing. Just the faint smell of ozone and rain. Mrs. Adler's words echoed in my mind. 1 life left. Maybe none. In the following days, the accident became another entry in the neighborhood's long, strange history. Some said the cat was a ghost. Others said it was a guardian. But something didn't sit right. If the cat had 9 lives, and that was the last one, then why did I keep seeing shadows move at night? A few weeks later, while walking home from school, I saw it again, just for a moment. Sitting on the same corner, tail curled, eyes fixed on me. It looked thinner now, tired, like the weight of time itself was pressing down on it. I called out softly, but it didn't move. It just blinked, slowly. And then I noticed something I hadn't before. Beneath its collar, a faint shimmer, almost like light passing through fog. Like it wasn't fully there. Before I could take a step, a bus roared by, and when it passed, the cat was gone. That night, I found a letter slipped under my door. No return address, just one line, typed on yellowed paper. "The watcher has done enough. Now it waits." I didn't sleep. Every sound outside felt amplified. The ticking of the clock, the creak of the wood, the faint rustle of something moving beyond the window. When I finally drifted off, I dreamt of the cat, standing on a long, endless road under moonlight. Each step it took left a glowing paw print that slowly faded away. At the end of the road there were 9 small lanterns, each flickering weakly. 8 were already out. When the 9th went dark, I woke up. Months passed. The neighborhood seemed quieter somehow, like the air itself had exhaled. No more fires, no more accidents. I tried to tell myself it was over, that whatever the Watcher had come to do, it had done. Until one stormy night, the power went out. I lit a candle and noticed movement outside the window. A shape, small, dark, unmistakable, sat by the gate, watching. I opened the door. Rain poured down in sheets, lightning flickering across the street. The cat stood there, drenched but unmoving. And this time it looked different. Older. Thinner. Its fur almost translucent in the lightning's flash. But its eyes, those eyes were still steady, deep, knowing. I knelt, whispering, "You're still here, aren't you?" It blinked once, then turned and walked toward the cemetery beyond the trees. I followed, slipping on the wet grass, until we reached the oldest part of the graveyard, the section nearly swallowed by moss and vines. The cat stopped beside one particular stone, weathered and unreadable. Lightning flashed again, and for a brief second I saw the engraving clearly. "For those who watched so others might live." When I looked down again, the cat was gone, just a few paw prints left in the mud, slowly filling with rainwater. I don't know if it finally moved on, or if it's still here, waiting for another moment, another lifetime, another person to save. But sometimes, when I walk past that corner at night, I swear I see something out of the corner of my eye. A flick of a tail, a shimmer in the air. And I think maybe the Watcher isn't gone. It's just resting, waiting for when we'll need it again. They say if you hear scratching at your door at 12:03 a.m., don't open it. It's not someone trying to get in. It's something trying to let you out. I grew up in a quiet town that liked to bury its stories deep. The kind of place where neighbors wave in daylight but shut their curtains tight after dark. Where people die old and secrets die older. When I was a kid, my grandmother used to tell me a story that never left me. She called it the Midnight Visitor. She'd talk about it whenever the power went out, or when thunder rolled in so low it rattled the windows. She'd lean close, light trembling from her candle, and whisper, "If you ever hear scratching at your door past midnight, you do not answer it. Not even if it sounds like a cat. Especially if it sounds like a cat." At first, I thought it was just one of her bedtime scares. But she never laughed afterward, never said I'm only kidding. She'd just sit back in her chair, eyes fixed somewhere behind me, like she was watching a memory play out over my shoulder. I didn't think much of it back then. But when I got older, after she passed, people around town started telling stories that sounded too familiar. It starts like this. Someone spots a black cat near their house, usually around midnight. They say it doesn't act like a normal cat. It doesn't flinch, doesn't meow, doesn't blink. It just sits and watches. And then, within a few days, something happens. A car crash, a sudden heart attack, a man found dead in his chair like he just fell asleep. No signs of struggle, no noise, no panic, just quiet. Every time someone remembers that black cat, sitting there, waiting. I thought it was local superstition. But the part that made my skin crawl was what came next, how consistent the details were. People would talk about the time. Always 12:03 a.m., not midnight, not 12:01. Always that same number. And if you ask what it did, they'd say it scratched at the door. Slow, steady, patient. Like it wasn't asking to be let in, but reminding you it was there. Some said the scratching stopped after 3 nights. Others claimed they opened the door and saw nothing, just still air and the faint smell of candle wax. A few said they saw eyes, 2 small reflective orbs floating in the dark, too low for a person, too bright for a cat. When my grandmother got older, she started talking about it more. She'd drift between clarity and confusion, but her tone stayed the same, low and serious. "I saw it once," she said, "back in '58. She told me about a neighbor, a widower who lived alone down the road. The man had been hearing scratching for 3 nights straight. Thought it was a stray trying to get warm. On the 4th night, he left a saucer of milk outside his door. The next morning, the milk was untouched. The man was dead in his bed. Heart failure, they said. But the way Grandma told it, when the undertaker carried him out, there were tiny paw prints in the frost leading up to the door. I asked her what the cat wanted. She said it didn't want anything. "It comes for those whose time has come," she whispered. "It doesn't kill. It collects." That word stuck with me. Collects. Like it wasn't a hunter. It was a messenger. A quiet, patient thing that shows up only when the hourglass runs empty. I remember asking her how it knew when to come. She said, "Time tells it." Then she smiled a little. A dry, tired smile. We all think we die when our heart stops. But for some, it's when the clock does. Over the years, the story became part of local folklore. You'd hear people mention it at bars, or during late-night drives when the road turned empty and fog rolled in. Some treated it like a joke. "Better check your clock, or the cat'll come for you." But a few, they didn't laugh. They just went quiet, especially the older ones. There was even an old obituary from the '70s. A woman who'd written in her will, "If a black cat comes to my door, don't open it." It's funny how things like that stick around. You grow up hearing them. You move away. You forget. Until the night you hear something at your own door. The first time I heard it, I thought it was a branch. I live alone now. Small house on the edge of town near the woods. The kind of quiet where you can hear every creak, every gust of wind, every heartbeat in the walls. It was a Thursday night. I was half asleep on the couch when the sound started. Scratch, scratch, scratch. 3 slow, even strokes. Then silence. I muted the TV, waited. Nothing. When I checked the time, my phone read 12:03 a.m. My stomach dropped. Not because I believed the story, but because coincidences like that don't sit right. I peeked through the window by the door. The porch was empty. Just fog. Still, I remember how cold the air felt when I touched the doorknob. Like something had been standing there a long time. The next night it happened again. Same sound, same time. But this time it lasted longer. Scratch, 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 pause, then scratch. Scratch. Like it was thinking. I turned on the porch light, and there it was. A black cat, sitting perfectly still, staring right at me through the glass. Its fur was dark enough to swallow the light, but its eyes looked old. Not scared, not wild, just patient. It didn't move when I spoke to it, didn't blink, it just stared, as if it already knew I was there. Then, after a few seconds, it turned and walked away. No hurry, no sound. The next morning, I found paw prints in the dew, leading straight to my door. But there were no prints leading away. That morning, I stood at the door for a long time. The sun was up, but it didn't feel like morning. The air still carried that chill that doesn't quite leave. The kind that sits deep in the house like fog trapped between walls. The paw prints were fresh, small, precise, leading right to the step. But when I followed them backward across the lawn, they just stopped. No trail in, no disturbance in the grass, just a neat, impossible line that ended at my door. I told myself I imagined it. That maybe another animal crossed the yard. The dew blurred the pattern. Something normal. That worked for about a day. The second night, it came back. Same time, 12:03 a.m. on the dot. This time, I didn't look. I turned the TV louder. tried to drown it out, but the sound crawled through the walls anyway. That same rhythm. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Always 3. Always patient. Then silence. Then again. It didn't feel like something asking to come in. It felt like something that already had, waiting for me to notice. The third night, things got strange. Every clock in the house stopped at 12:03. The kitchen, the microwave, even my watch. No power outage, no storm, just the second hand freezing mid-tick. That faint electric hum dying into silence. The only sound was the scratching, and my own breathing. I tried calling someone, anyone, but the call wouldn't connect. My phone glitched out, the screen pulsing white for a second, like static behind glass. Then, a sound I'll never forget. Something light brushing against the window from outside. Not claws. Something softer, like fur. The next morning, my neighbor, an old man named Harris, came by to ask if I'd heard anything strange during the night. I almost said no, but something in his face stopped me. He said he'd seen a black cat on my porch again, sitting there facing the door. Didn't move when he shooed it. Didn't flinch when he knocked. Just stared. Then, his voice dropped. It looked at me like it knew me, like it was waiting for me instead. He left in a hurry. Didn't come back the next day. When I checked on him later that week, his house was dark. They said he'd passed in his sleep. Peacefully. I wanted to believe that. But that night there were 2 sets of paw prints at my door. After that, I couldn't sleep. I started noticing things. Small, quiet shifts that didn't make sense. My cat figurine, a little ceramic one my grandmother gave me, kept changing position. Not much. Just slightly turned. Like something small had brushed past it. Sometimes when I walked down the hall at night, I'd see movement in my peripheral vision. A flicker of black, low to the ground. Never fast, never fleeing. Just there. Waiting. I thought about my grandmother again. Her voice that night when the candlelight shook, whispering, "It doesn't kill. It collects." I realized then that maybe it wasn't warning the living. Maybe it was preparing the dead. Maybe the scratching wasn't about entry, but invitation. By the end of the week, I stopped checking the clock. It didn't matter, because I already knew what time it was when I heard it. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The sound wasn't even loud anymore. It was inside the air itself. Inside the house, the floor, the walls. I could feel it behind me sometimes. Like a heartbeat, just a fraction too slow. That night, I dreamed of my grandmother. She was standing in my doorway, lit only by that same flickering candle from years ago. And beside her feet, a black cat. Its eyes glowed faintly, reflecting something that wasn't there. She looked at me and said, "You can't run from time, child, but you can face it." Then I woke up to the scratching. It was louder this time, more deliberate. Scratch, scratch, pause, then one final, long drag, scratch. I stood up. My legs felt hollow. The room was so quiet that I could hear the soft tick of the old clock starting up again. Only it wasn't ticking right. It kept looping the same second over and over. 12:03. 12:03. 12:03. The air felt thick. My breath fogged in front of me even though the heater was on. Then I heard it. The faintest meow. Long, drawn out, not plaintive, just acknowledging. Something waited on the other side of that door. I thought of all the stories. The milk left untouched. The prints that led nowhere. The people who simply stopped being. And for the first time in my life, I understood what she meant by collects. It wasn't the cat I feared. It was the certainty. I reached for the doorknob. The metal was cold, colder than it should have been. And as my hand touched it, the scratching stopped. Silence. Pure Total silence. Not even the hum of electricity. Not the wind. Not my own breath. Just the faint feeling that something was on the other side, matching my every move. I don't know why, but I whispered, "I'm here." And something, just barely audible, whispered back. Not a voice. Not a word. Just a sound like a sigh or a purr. I turned the handle. There was no fear anymore. Only the kind of stillness that comes when you finally stop fighting the dark. The last thing I remember seeing before the lights went out were two eyes, low, bright, reflecting me. And then the clock ticked once more. 12:04.